We live our lives under the shadow of a silent sentinel, a white, jagged shield that covers the poles and the high peaks of our world. We perceive the ice as a constant, a static background to the human drama, a frozen vault that keeps the oceans in their place. We look at the 20 million cubic kilometers of ice scattered across our planet and feel a sense of security, believing that the cold is eternal. But that security is a psychological trap. The ice is not a static object. It is a pressurized dynamic system, and it is currently undergoing a violent, irreversible liquidation. Imagine waking up to find that the maps of your childhood are no longer valid, that the borders of nations have been rewritten not by war, but by the relentless rising tide of a planet that has lost its cooling system. This is the clinical reality of the Great Melting. This is not a what-if scenario for a disaster movie. It is a biological and geographical reset. Today we examine the hydrodynamics of a drowned world and the terrifying reality of what happens when the Earth finally loses its temper. Welcome to Discovered. To understand the magnitude of the threat, we must first look at the sheer volume of the disaster. If every glacier, every polar ice sheet, and every mountain cap were to melt, the global sea level would rise by a staggering 65 meters. That is over 200 feet of vertical water. This is not just a flood, it is the total redistribution of the planet's mass. As the ice melts, the weight shifts from the poles to the equator, physically altering the Earth's rotation and its gravitational field. We are talking about a 65-meter surge that would submerge every coastal city on the face of the planet. But the water is only the first instrument of our race. We must look at the albedo effect, the Earth's ability to reflect solar radiation back into space. For millions of years, the white sheets of the Arctic and Antarctic have acted as a planetary mirror, reflecting 80% of the sun's heat. As the ice vanishes, that mirror is replaced by the dark, absorbent skin of the open ocean. The planet stops reflecting heat and starts drinking it. The global average temperature would climb from a stable 14 degrees Celsius to a feverish 26 degrees. This is a global oven scenario. The atmosphere would become a thick, humid shroud, trapped in a thermal suicide loop where the heat accelerates the melting, and the melting accelerates the heat. Let us begin a world tour of this waterlogged nightmare. In North America, the geography of the continent is decapitated. Florida is erased from the map. The entire state, along with the Gulf Coast, vanishes beneath a brackish sea. New York City becomes a skeletal reef of steel and glass, its subway tunnels turned into stagnant underwater catacombs. In the west, San Francisco is reduced to a cluster of isolated islands, an archipelago of the abandoned. The Central Valley of California, the breadbasket of the nation, becomes a brand new bay of saltwater, rendering the land sterile and the population homeless. The Gulf of California would stretch north past the ruins of San Diego, turning the Southwest into a jagged, drowning coastline. In South America, the Amazon basin, the lungs of the planet, undergoes a grotesque transformation. The rainforest does not just die, it is drowned. The Amazon becomes a shallow, tepid inland sea, its biodiversity replaced by a graveyard of rotting timber and methane-belching bacteria. Buenos Aires, the coastal plains of Uruguay and the vast lowlands of Paraguay are swallowed. What was once the most fertile land on the continent becomes a salt-marsh abyss. Africa, while losing the least land overall, faces a different kind of death. The rising global heatwave turns the interior of the continent into an uninhabitable frying pan, where temperatures reach levels that the human body cannot survive. But the coastlines do not escape. Egypt's Alexandria and Cairo are reclaimed by the Mediterranean, their ancient history dissolved in salt water. The Nile Delta, the lifeblood of millions, vanishes, triggering a multi-generational famine that would destabilize the entire hemisphere. Europe becomes a ghost of its former self. London is a memory, its clock towers serving as markers for the rising deep. Venice, which has spent centuries fighting the water, finally stops floating and sinks into the permanent dark. The Netherlands, a nation built on the defiance of the sea, becomes the underlands, erased from the map entirely. Denmark is liquidated. The Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and the Caspian Sea expand into extra-large versions of themselves, flooding the heart of the continent and turning the cradle of Western civilization into a series of isolated, starving hilltops. In Asia, the scale of the catastrophe is beyond human comprehension. Over 600 million people in China alone would be displaced as the coastline moves hundreds of miles inland. Bangladesh, one of the most populous regions on Earth, is almost entirely submerged, creating a migration crisis of billions. India's coastlines, the Mekong Delta, and the lowlands of Cambodia are reclaimed by the sea. These are not just people moving house. These are entire civilizations being uprooted and forced into a collision with nuclear-armed neighbors over the remaining high ground. But we must look at the final boss of this scenario, Antarctica. This ice titan holds 80% of all Earth's fresh water. For centuries, we believed it was a stable, frozen fortress. But scientific data shows that the fortress is being attacked from below, especially in West Antarctica. The ice is melting from the thermal abyss. Warming ocean water is eating away at the grounding lines of the glaciers. Like a blowtorch against a block of wax, Since 1992, we have lost an average of 65 million tons of Antarctic ice every single year. We are losing an Everest-sized volume of ice annually, and this ice is not just water, it is a vault for ancient secrets. This is the hidden terror of the melting, the microbiological breach. Within the permafrost and the deep glacial ice, there are pathogens that have been frozen for millions of years. These are viruses and bacteria that the human immune system has never encountered, ancient killers from the Pleistocene or earlier. As the ice melts, these organisms are waking up. They are being exhaled into the atmosphere and drained into the water tables. We are inviting a second pandemic from the grave of history, a biological assault by entities that were ancient before humanity even learned to speak. We are trading our cooling system for a prehistoric laboratory of disease. The melting of the ice sheets injects massive quantities of fresh water into the salty oceans. This disrupts the thermaline circulation, the global conveyor belt of currents that regulates the world's climate. If the conveyor belt stops, the redistribution of heat fails. We would face a world of chaotic extremes, while the globe roasts. Parts of Europe could face a localized ice age as the warm currents are shut off. The weather would become a series of unpredictable tantrums, superstorms fueled by the massive temperature gradients, tsunamis generated by glacial calving events, and atmospheric rivers that drown the remaining land in incessant rain. The societal decay of this scenario is a study in clinical collapse. Imagine the economic ruin as every port, every coastal refinery, and every maritime trade route is destroyed. The global supply chain would vanish overnight. The displacement of billions of people would trigger resource wars that make the conflicts of the 20th century look like minor disputes. We would be a species fighting for the scraps of the mountains, our technology useless in a world where the infrastructure of the digital age is underwater. Some suggest that we could adapt, that we would build floating cities or massive seawalls, but seawalls cannot hold back 65 meters of water. Floating cities cannot feed billions of people. This is the submarine tower nightmare, where the icons of our vanity, the Burj Khalifa, the Eiffel Tower, the skyscrapers of Tokyo, become buoys for a world that has no exits. We would be a species living in a water coliseum, fighting over the last dry rocks while the climate continues to roast us from above and drown us from below. This discovery, this realization that the ice is our only shield, should be the central focus of our existence. But we continue to burn carbon like it's a campfire game, hitting the fast-forward button on our own erasure. We are trading the stability of the Holocene for a flooded dystopia. The future is not set in stone, it is set in ice, and the ice is crying. The floor is thinner than you think, the Sentinel is falling, Antarctica is sweating, and the deep ocean is rising to meet it. We are currently witnessing the end of the world as we know it, 1 centimeter at a time. The ice was our consent to live on this planet, and that consent is being withdrawn. Sleep well, knowing that the foundation of your world is a frozen vault that is currently leaking its contents into your streets. The heat is rising, the tides are coming, and the white mirror is shattering. The end is not a fire, it is a long, cold, and relentless flood. The end is beneath you. If you are prepared to face the truths that the world chooses to ignore, stay with us. There are many more scientific anomalies and geological horrors waiting to be unburied. We will continue to explore the truths that have been hidden in the shadows of our failing environment. Subscribe to Discovered and activate the notification bell. In a world of comfortable delusions and funny climate memes, we provide the cold, clinical evidence of reality. Do not miss our next report, where we will examine the next impossible or almost possible scenario that threatens the very definition of humanity. See you in the next investigation. Remember, keep a life jacket handy, because the abyss is rising to say hello.